welcome. Oh, hold on. I think I've got it on this one. There we go. It is book club time. I'm joined with Patrick Rothfuss today because we had a little arrangement. You mentioned this book when I interviewed you. That's going to be very annoying. When I interviewed you a long, long time ago, I was like, what's a book series that you love? And you were like, have you read the Murderbot book series? And I said, no. And you were like, if you cover that book, I will get on the stream and tell you how great it is. And here we are.
Yeah, it's probably a toss up between that and Naomi Novik's Scholomance in terms of like what I have enjoyed most over these last 3-4 years. Was
it Scholomance? I remember you bringing up Naomi. I thought it was Spinning Silver.
I mean, yeah, I love Spinning Silver too, but she has a new series.
It's even better.
And by new, it's not super new. It's been around for a while. But no, Murderbot was introduced to me by a friend, and I have read it with my eyes at least once. I've read it out the first 4 novellas to my boys. Which that was an experiment, and they love Murderbot. But I've listened to them all at least 2 or 3 times.
Oh, yeah. You listened as well? What was your take on the narration of it?
Oh, it's very good. I think it's Kevin R. Free.
It is Kevin R. Free.
And
Kevin R. Free sounds like he's never hurt anyone or anything in his entire existence of life.
Does sound a bit like a comic book character.
I was going to say a maths teacher.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But no, I adore the books, and I will say what the quote that I would give them if they needed a quote from me. It's to say, I don't think I've ever related to a character as much as I've related to Murderbot.
That's okay. So this is what's really, really interesting. And this is what I want to have a chat about, which is this character. We're going to go into a lot here. We're talking about the first 2 novellas, as you can see, right here. We're talking about the first 2 in the series, All Systems Red and Artificial Condition. This was your homework to complete both of them so we could talk about all of them. Now, one of the great perks of the Geek Bomb book club, soon to be Maude Garrett's book club. I'm not sure if you heard the news, Pat.
No.
Geek Bomb is getting do. So instead of playing and watching and reading and all these other things and talking about news and trying to cover so much with a small team, we just thought, what would the book club look like if that's all we did? And so we are putting All Systems Red into our book club. And so the perks for that one is that not only do we have an Excel spreadsheet that is in depth where everyone can write their recommendations for books out, we've planned out 2023's books already pretty much.
Dang.
Bar like 2 books. And we also have a Google Doc for every single book club that we do where people can write in themes, discussion points, quotes, all the things that they loved about this book, and we have it in a Google Doc for everyone to contribute to. We also have the Discord. A big hi to everyone who's in there. We are using the hashtag reading section, and that is, again, a perk that you can get in there. This is where you'll be asking questions. Usually they'll be in a call and they're able to chat and talk. But in this particular show, we're doing written questions only. So if you're in there, a big hi. I see you all in the comments already. So let's have a look at this doc because I want to read out a little bit about Murderbot. You know the author, Martha. Oh, what have I done?
Just a bit. I mean, you go to enough cons and you are on panels. And she also helped out with World Builders, like way back in the day before, like she had donated some books, I think, but in the crush of the fundraiser, a lot of times I miss things. And then later, I think I was reading something of hers and then somebody's like, well, yeah. And she helps with your charity. And I'm like, oh, wait. So no, she's lovely, and Murderbot is far from her first thing. She's written so much over the years, and all of it really lovely.
So she's an American writer of speculative fiction. She's published a number of fantasy novels, young adult novels, media tie-ins, short stories, non-fiction essays on fantasy and science fiction subjects. Her novels have been translated into 12 different languages. She's won 4 Hugo Awards, 2 Nebula Awards, 3 Locus Awards for the Murderbot Diaries. And this is the series for the first 2 books that we will be covering today. She's also known for her fantasy series, The Books of the Raksura and Illyrin. Am I getting that right at all?
Boy, I am never sure with something that I've just read with my eyes.
Yes.
I think when I went back and I reread the Rakshasa, if I'm remembering it right, I'm probably butchering that or conflating 2 different words in my head. I remember reading that, and there was some point in there that because I did have her contact info, I think I sent her an email saying,
"Help me."
No, what I did is I'm like, I think I read these a long time ago. Also, it's possible that I ripped some of this off because like some phrasing or something, it was so, I read it and then I flipped to like, when was this? Oh, way before I published mine. And then I'm like, hey, I didn't do it intentionally, but maybe it was lurking. And she's like, there's nothing, I've read your stuff. Nothing is that close. I obviously, whatever. So
what was the inspiration? What was that thing that kind of nestled into your brain and then was redelivered?
It's been years and years and years, so I can't remember. I want to think that it was something, some little thing. It's easy to see similarities even when there isn't inspiration. Like a lot of people are like, wow, I love your books. It's so cool to see somebody who reads Dostoevsky. And I'm like, I don't. You're wrong. I'm just rereading Earthsea now, and I'm like, I could do an annotated version of Earthsea saying, I read this a ton as a kid and then I didn't for 20 years, but here's probably where the fingerprints show up on Name of the Wind. But yeah.
I think that's a beautiful thing though, because what it is essentially doing, it's these words or moments or themes or ideas that do burrow in, they stick. There's such a finite amount of memory that we have. So for something to kind of take place in our brains for that amount of time, even though we don't have the origin source for it, but I think that that's really, really special, that that's something that you've remembered and you're able to draw inspiration from at a separate time. I mean, there is no such thing as a new idea, as they say anymore, to have like a completely fresh new idea. It's built on counterparts of a bunch of different inspirations and things that we've seen over time. I mean, my brother's writing a book and he's like, it's 1 part Harry Potter, 1 part Mass Effect, 1 part Lord of the Rings, 2 part, and you're just like, yeah, that's kind of how things go now. You pick and choose sort of what you're inspired by and how it works and you go for it. But I think that if I were to hear from someone whose work I admire that I was an influence to them, chances are I'd burst into tears.
It's, by and large, everyone that I've met in the sci-fi fantasy community, all the authors are, lovely and understanding. And also, like, odds are you don't really thrive in this community if you don't realize that. I will say there's no original ideas or everyone steals from everybody. I could argue all sides of that depending on where my blood sugar is at. I personally do. I mean, if you believe that you can rip people off, then the opposite should be true, that there are people
create anew
who can really make legitimately new things. And so
is the argument, is it new or is it just new to you?
Well, if you say that nobody makes anything new, then that doesn't work through extension, because that implies that there was only one idea at the beginning of time and we've all been permuting and telling different versions of it. That's nonsense. Yeah. Like, people do create new things and they do have new ideas. Otherwise it's just human centipede and we're not that.
Thank God.
I mean, personally, that's my view. But, and again, like I said, depending on where I'm at in my head or like how cussed I'm feeling, I can argue either side of that one.
I mean, that's the point of most things, being able to see both sides of it and being able to get the perspective from it. So I agree with you, though. I agree. Like, even if it has been inspired, it is new. It has a newness to it. And we as a species are evolving at such a rapid rate. And this is kind of tying back to the book about where we can go as a species. I think my first question, talking about the fact, Murderbot, he is a robot that is humanoid, who has organic parts that have been harvested, but he is a man-made creation that is assigned instructions, and but he's still AI, but he's limited within the confines of what the chip allows him to do, until you realize that they don't want to put money into making quality product. They're just trying to churn and burn. And he can glitch his system, and he's hacked his system, which means that he has to adhere to his operations. And now he's a free agent or a rogue bot. We're learning about what parts of him are human based or organic, as he says, and what it's like being inside of his AI brain. I love the idea of sort of being cybernetic or this cyborg-esque type thing. Would you go down that route ever?
I mean, my only real answer is the least interesting answer, which is I would need more information. It's sort of like is a person with diabetes who has an insulin pump a cyborg? For that matter, is somebody with glasses a cyborg? One thing I will throw in, somebody did mention it in the chat, and I love it because they said here, Murderbot is an it. Murderbot is not a he.
Oh, yes.
And because, and the thing is, the person who introduced me to this book, which, I'm so grateful to her for bringing me in. I love it. And then I would send her texts. I'd be listening to it and I'd send texts. And finally they're like, so you think Murderbot is a he? And I'm like, well, yeah, he. And they're like, no, they're not. They don't have, they're not male gendered. And then I'm like, oh, I'm so sure though. And then I went back and looked, and my friend was like, I tend to think of Murderbot as a she. But they're like, but I know Murderbot is it. And that did not happen by accident. Martha 100% is on there because there's I don't even know. I don't think this is a person who was turned into a Murderbot. So the whole augmentation thing, Murderbot is a construct. Mm-hmm. And so I view the whole thing as sort of like, it's many things. It's a little bit of tongue in cheek. It's taking a brickbat to all of corporate culture. There's satire. It's just a good story. But, some of my favorite parts and what keeps me coming back to it is, what does it mean to be a person? Like, human is different, because Murderbot's like, no, I'm not a human. That's gross. Don't be gross. And it's like, and I'm not an AI. There are bots. I'm not that. I am a construct. I have organic parts. I have machine parts. There are AI out there who are intelligent, and he talks to them, and they are entities with autonomy. There are humans. And then there is Murderbot, who interacts with both and knows that they, humans aren't comfortable around them. Also, he's not a bot, but also has literally not had autonomy because Murderbot is a made thing designed to protect humans as a security consultant. And so it's to say that this is an examination of what it is to be human, I feel is a vast disservice to it. Even though if there were a book that did nothing but that would be a great book. But again, that's sort of my angle on that.
I didn't even think about that as well. Until it was addressed in the book in a way. I noticed it more. Well, I don't know what this says about me. I wasn't so concerned about Murderbot's default gender. It was a male for me because a male was reading the book.
Right. And
it was
I think
decided for me.
I know I could blame it on that. And I did the first time I consumed it. I did audiobook, and the audio narration is great. Kevin R. Free. And also, if you read fantasy, by and large, the assumption is you have a young orphan boy going to a school of magic. And so most of the books you've read growing up is going to be a male protagonist. There's a ton of issues with male gaze there. But so we're primed to do that. But I think it's because, like I said, I identify with Murderbot more than any other character I've ever read in any book.
I will say that there is some sort of unspoken bias about a security being and like maintaining a security position within a group to be a more masculine role.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
And a detachment from emotion to be a more masculine quality.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I agree.
So that's kind of it for me. When I did notice it is in the second book, we'll jump around a little bit and do segues, but in the second book, when we meet for the first time a companion bot, and we'd heard about a companion
sex bot.
Exactly. Yep. In the first book, and it's disdain against them in a way, which was a really interesting conversation to have in itself. But I noticed it's very apparent way to describe the sex bot as an it.
And because, even though, and I know at one point, and again, spoilers here, everybody, if you haven't read these first two, and to say books, these are novellas. They are so consumable. And again, I rarely choose huge, difficult books to read with my boys. I have recently, just this year, read all 4 of the Murderbot novellas to my boys. So they're so easy to engage with. But at one point, Murderbot is like, well, they're sort of produced to specs, and so if I'm gonna keep saying if Murderbot is going to stay incognito, its bot pilot friend says you need to change your configuration. And it's like, and he's like, I'm fine. I'm acting like a human all over. And it's like, look at yourself on the cameras. Would you spot you? And he's like, yes. So then it's like, what do you change? Makes its hair a little longer.
Mm-hmm. Body hair.
Actually, yep. Adds a little body hair and he's like, how I hate this. I hate having body hair. I hate having more hair on my head. And then his bot friend says, well, we could give you genitalia, and Murderbot is incensed, and he's like, I'm not a sex bot. And so there's a bias. I'm not that, and so there's disdain, and I don't think it's necessarily against, and not to jump to the end of the conversation, Murderbot hates itself. Murderbot is full of self-loathing. Murderbot is the hottest of hot messes. But
it also has amazing qualities as well, like is really task-driven, protects fundamentally at a level of protection, is good at its job.
You're describing
does the bare minimum.
Every Germanic man ever is who you just described. We are judged according to our ability to do work. Are you functional? You're not worth something, but you're not valuable unto yourself, but you can do things which are valuable. But
whereas
for me,
us ladies being the companion bot, we don't need to know your name. Do you function for my need? Yeah.
But murder, it's interesting to me. There is disdain there, but like Murderbot shows disdain for kind of everyone.
Yes, making friends is an issue. Doesn't want to have small talk. Doesn't want to be looked at. Doesn't want the art of trust. Art pun, which is the name of the transport AI. But trust does not come readily, and immediately we're taught through Murderbot's lens never to trust another sec unit, never to trust another AI, never to trust a bot, because a program can be changed that is out of their control. That could mean that I kill you or you kill me, and that's out of our hands. But that is a very likely end goal for us that we have no control over. And so but I mean that when you look at the humanized version of that is, I'm going to isolate myself. I'm going to put up walls all around me, because if you can't hurt me, then I cannot be hurt. If you can't be close to me, then you can't affect me. It's sort of like the AI science fiction version of what we are experiencing, which is why I truly do think that everyone can relate to a quality of Murderbot, which is why it's such a relatable book. I'm amiss to say that the quality that I relate to the most is just coasting. Let me do the bare minimum, but I'll still somehow get the results.
I think Murderbot is amazingly relatable. It is just good, compelling writing.
It's hilarious.
It's so well written, and again, when I talk about what I love in these books, I hate that, in talking about it, I make it sound like, like a master's thesis, analyzing the feminist subtext of King Lear. Like, it's not that. It is a absolutely easy, fun, brilliant read that holds up multiple times. But, at the same time, it's, God, I keep coming back to these. How about this? Here's the first story I will tell, and apologize for all the ones that are coming. I went to a con. This was one of the very first cons I got invited to. It was children's literature, and a person went up as tiny little con, maybe 100 people in a hotel, just like so small. But somebody pinged me, and I went, and the person who went up and spoke, and it wasn't groundbreaking, but they made a good point, and they said, when we give books to kids, the mistake, and it wasn't just sci-fi and fantasy, they were talking about problem fiction, which is a genre that I'd never heard of before. But a problem fiction is a genre of YA where there's a kid with a problem, and maybe the problem is their parents are going through a divorce. The problem is their mom is sick. The problem, and that is the story. It's like, there's no secret world. There's no vampires. It's like they're trying to live their life and there's a problem. Mm-hmm. And what the person said is, these books are amazing because they give children experience outside of their own and help them understand things outside their experience, mm-hmm. without having to live through it. It's like Neil Gaiman said, I wish that oh, my child, I wish I could give you the gift of experience without the burden of experience. And, but the problem that teachers, if you've made a mistake as a teacher or a parent or a librarian, if you're like, oh, little Timmy, their parents going through a divorce, I'll give them a book about a kid whose parents are going through divorce, and that will help. No. They're going through it. They don't want to read about it. And so, on the other hand, the story of a kid who is going through having to change schools or something, they could learn there because it's at a remove from their personal experience, and therefore it's not too close. And similarly, this is one of the big benefits of fantasy, is fantasy gives us arm's length from reality and allows us to discuss things without them being so personal that it's impossible or painful. And so you could argue that in some ways, like any novel worth its salt is an examination of what it is to be human, because we're all in it for characters. And why the fuck would you read a book if it didn't have characters you cared about or who taught you something about humanity? But in Murderbot, you see somebody looking at humanity who is on the outside, but somebody who is still a person and therefore human. And therefore you're able to get a perspective that where it's harder to feel attacked.
Yes.
And that is the joy of speculative fiction, is it gives us space to experiment with thoughts and feelings, and makes the conversation a little easier to have.
And I think Murderbot in this instance, who is using its observation of human as a way to not only regurgitate nuance of character, what it's like being human, taking a step back and seeing something for the first time with AIs, but also then processing human emotion, feeling. Some of my favorite interactions in this book from Murderbot is when they are talking about they're clicking emotions. Why are they being like that? But they're registering what these emotions are. They're registering sort of like the behaviors between. They're kind of like factually describing that person likes that person flirts with them, but nothing's really going on. And it's just a really sort of computerized understanding of really like rainbow emotions, which is like, it's not black and white at all, but you see it through zeros and ones. And I always really, really love that, because it's a way to talk about human emotion without like, I guess sort of like being so on the nose about it. There's a wonderful way that it's done, and it's through humor and observation, but through a different entity's eyes, that I really, really love about this book. And yet you still, as a reader, are finding ways that you can relate to this character, which is not human, which has its own different struggles. And just like you said, it's not enough to be like, you're getting fired, your workload's too much, and you're experiencing severe depression. You have a Murderbot who isolates, who uses self-care to watch serials and watch so many shows back to back. And I think it was Miss Necromancer wrote earlier saying, I love how it turned around and literally faced the wall to continue conversations because it was feeling too awkward. All of those are just beautiful, I think.
I mean, and this is actually a little tricky for me because it's quite close to me. And this is something that I never had to deal with personally before. But over the last couple of years, I have become acquainted with like being in a place where I don't feel like I can have a conversation while I actually look at a person. Mm-hmm. That's something that I never coped with before. And it isn't like, and I will say in my experience, it isn't like, oh no, so awkward. That's sort of playful, like it's
not getting the gravitas of the situation in a way.
It's like, and what you mentioned before, it's like Murderbot was talking to, somebody who they will vehemently deny being friends with, which is art.
Yes.
But and what is in some ways really horrifying is that art is trying to talk to Murderbot, and Murderbot is like, what are you doing? What is wrong with you? Why won't you leave me alone? Murderbot does not understand this thing trying to be friends with it, which is very relatable to me because Murderbot has never had this experience and also cannot understand why anyone would want to interact with it. But because
of a lifetime or an online life of oppression.
Not oppression, not just oppression, slavery and abuse.
Yes.
like Murderbot, like because it needed to do what it was told, or its governor module would injure or kill it. And Murderbot talks about in a very, it doesn't dwell on it because it's in the same way that I don't bother telling everyone about the urinal cake. You know, it's like, if you've pissed in a urinal, you know what a urinal cake is. Why would I bring it up? Murderbot's life is, if you have multiple sec units and the humans get bored, they will make you fight each other for fun. And that means you can be forced to almost kill each other, and then you're slapped in your repair cubicle, and that's a Tuesday, you know? And also, if at any point somebody tells you to, you will go and do something and you have to die, you know? And imagine living in that way for a month. But realistically, Murderbot has lived this way for decades before becoming, like, hacking its governor module and gaining autonomy and freedom. Like,
but still not even reaching for that freedom, still staying within a way where it can feel so minimalized, not looked at, not observed, not making any loud noises, so it can just have its tiny slice of fulfillment.
And I love Murderbot, but when you said self-care, Murderbot isn't engaging in self-care. Like, Murderbot is engaging desperately in avoidance. Murderbot just wants to watch media and not exist, which is better than not existing, but it is half an inch up from I give up and I want to die.
Oh,
that's
no.
where Murderbot is.
Because
that's
I see it as self-care, because that's what I do.
I mean,
when I isolate and I'm like, you know what, I'm going to watch 412 episodes of this show, and when I surface, I hope I'm going to be good for the world when I'm done.
And we actually, Martha let us make a Murderbot t-shirt, you know, and I will also say this: how much do I like Murderbot? For the friend that introduced me to the book, I was goofing around. This was, gosh, years ago. I started writing an episode of Sanctuary Moon for them because I just started goofing around, and it was going to be a big lead up, you know, about and then the reveal, you know, would be that this is Sanctuary Moon.
It's great.
But man, it's that, I mean, in some ways, anything you do to cope is a type of self-care, but, you know, but there is good self-care and there is triage self-care, and Murderbot, you know, doesn't do anything for themselves.
No.
Through the whole series, Murderbot does want to take care of people, does care about people sometimes, and then hates themselves for caring about people.
But wants to do a good job, which always requires care of person.
There is a certain amount of pride in their skills. But again, I would argue absolutely against them seeing any value in themselves.
I will say, though, a really wonderful thing that I observed the second time reading the first book was this, and this is my argument for self-care. I love this. It's not necessarily self-care, but it becomes subconscious self-improvement. By watching these serials and by dedicating the time into, it's become a passion. It is really involved in these fictional characters' storylines, their looks in a way, like that's a comment that they've made about the attractiveness of these people in the serials. But it's understanding human interaction through watching so much of this media, to the point where, and the first part of All Systems Red, Murderbot is fighting off this beast-like thing that has captured and hurt one of the scientists, and another scientist has gone into shock. And it's going through protocols to just handle the situation. But then watching the feedback, and I love that as a storytelling tool, that any situation can be reviewed and seen from different angles all the time. But what they discovered was during this protocol experience of just trying to get this woman who's been bitten and her leg is bleeding and this man who's gone into shock, the review footage showed that he started using very human traits and conversation to get this man out of shock. Do you have kids? Tell me about your children. And doing a de-stressful conversation. And Murderbot didn't even realize it was doing that. So it's formed a new skill set on human interaction based on the amount of serials it's been watching.
And I mean, I will, for Murderbot, and here's where we get the downside of speculative fiction, the distance, because there we can say, because really more than one thing is happening in a story all the time, or at least the good stories. And, Murderbot at some point talks about, like somebody in the chat said, they love how Art needs to watch shows with Murderbot.
Mm-hmm.
And
I can read that out. It was Embrant Aaliyah.
Yeah.
Saying, I found the idea that Art wants to watch media with Murderbot, who has more in common with and more direct interaction with humans, to help process what they are seeing. A compelling concept. To which Vaden responded, I think that's part of why Murderbot has a negative initial dislike for Art. Art reminds Murderbot of itself too much. To which Elias says, I think exactly. Murderbot has become accustomed working with / understanding humans, but now Art is a new challenge because it's an entity a lot closer to itself. I'm sorry. Yes, Andrew?
I think that is a fair read, but it is not a read I necessarily agree with, or I certainly don't agree with very strongly, because I think, how about this? I realized that throughout my life, I've kind of gravitated to people for my friendships that probably are neuroatypical. Probably a bunch of people who are similarly undiagnosed ADHD, or various whatever, or anxiety disorder, or, a lot of these things they're very similar. And actually what they're realizing now is that most of these things are different textures and flavors of trauma. With, that just look different because of how they permeate. But one of the things that happened a couple of years ago is I was talking to somebody and I go, what about Jerry? And I'm just picking a random name to file the serial numbers off. And I said, what's up with Jerry? What's Jerry's thing? Right? And they go, no, they don't got one. I'm like, yeah, I mean, but what's their thing? Like, do they got anxiety? Are they kind of depressive? They kind of whatever. And they're like, no, he doesn't have anything. He is just a guy and he has a family and he's kind of happy. And I'm like, fuck, that's why I don't get him. I absolutely cannot relate to this person and they seem fucked up to me. Something is off with them. And now from there, that was just a funny little moment to me, is realizing that the one person who's probably neurotypical that I hang out with socially, what feels weird to me is that they don't have a thing. Now, the reason Murderbot doesn't relate well to Art is that, and here's the thing, Art is smarter than Murderbot.
Can't spell smart without Art.
Exponentially smarter and quite above and beyond like processing power or talent or education or whatever. Like, Art has had a long time and been in a community. Art has an incredible amount of emotional intelligence. It works with other people. It's a member of the team. It has autonomy and freedom to move itself. It cares about it. It's part of a family. It's part of a loving, functional, multi-person found family. And Art has never been abused or hurt. Murderbot has never had a friend, had any freedom, or ever been shown kindness or affection of any kind. The best it has ever received from anyone is that it has been ignored.
Well, Mensa
And
and
so
this new team from
no.
you don't reckon?
That's first. That's book one. That's book one. I'm talking about pre this
Yes.
series.
That's the first. This is the first time he's been shown kindness and respect in decisions, and it comments frequently that there's not much drama and that it's unsure about this level of consideration that it's being shown.
And the reason art, the reason that Murderbot responds so badly to art is because, yeah, art is really smart. Art has this incredible emotional intelligence. Art, if you're reading through that second book, art is constantly bucking up because art is like, well, just listen, just be a person. I'm just trying to be your friend. And Murderbot is like, you can't be, because if your people give you an order, you'll have to do whatever they say. We're not in control of ourselves. And the thing is, Murderbot is right.
But that's also Murderbot's survival technique.
No. What I'm saying is Murderbot is objectively, positivistically, gravity points down, right. And the fact that as emotionally intelligent as art is an idiot for not realizing that Murderbot has no frame of reference for any sort of healthy interaction. And the fact that art keeps approaching Murderbot like that is a great sign that very intelligent people who are emotionally intelligent, art can't understand how traumatized Murderbot is, because he's a victim of abuse.
I was actually going to say that the art's reaction and response, having demonstrated to Murderbot previously, we're talking about book 2 in this interaction. Art is the AI transport that has decided to take on Murderbot to transport to a different planet, and tries to build trust and be an aid to Murderbot. They end up becoming a great buddy cop like duo, and they help each other immensely. But to get to that place took time, as does trust to build. What I noticed in this interaction, which is what you're talking about, is when you have a fully formed person who has not been affected by trauma trying to use those daily interactions to someone that has been affected by trauma. And what was a bit of an all systems red flag to me, put that on the pun count, was that art was very incessant and persistent. So when Murderbot shuts down, which is a boundary, I have had too much, I cannot cope, I do not want to continue this conversation, I'm going to button down. And art, having all the time in the world and being that persistent person, doesn't register or read that as the conversation's over. So they wait. And they wait until Murderbot feels an efficient amount of time has gone by to reboot, and art's there going, let's pick up that conversation exactly where we left off. And Murderbot realizing, oh, art has shown me that they are persistent. They do not let things go. I can't avoid. I can't put my wall. I can't put up my coping mechanisms. I can barely put up time. I have to go through this at their request and with their time and on their terms. So that's something that I really want to talk about with this perspective, because we've all kind of just said that we can relate to Murderbot in a particular way. I will say, as someone who is outwardly an extrovert but recharges in introverted ways, hence the serial self-care, I will say that you just shared something really important with me that I would love to learn from, and that is eye contact. I am art with my eye contact. I am relentless. I am persistent. I have learnt that eye contact is a way that you show interest, that you connect with the person. It is a massive part of my job. If you're okay to share with me about this, I would love to learn the other side of that.
Well, here's the thing. My whole life, I've been the same way. It's one of the things I would teach my students. In college, I would do a quick 10-minute, usually closer to 5. I would say, hey, you want to know what it takes to be a good student. Most of it is just looking like a good student. Here's what you guys look like. And I take a desk to the front of the classroom and I show them how obvious it is when they're not paying attention. And I say, just look at your fucking teacher, you know, because that's the only way we can tell that you're listening. Now, of course, these days, I'm a mental health advocate. I'd really try to be informed. I know that for some people, especially people with high degrees of empathy, like dangerously high degrees of empathy, like eye contact is too much. And I'm always tuned in. But also, you know, I've always been healthier than I am now. And, you know, what I have realized is that there are times when I'm not okay. And I do still have to be in a meeting, even on Zoom. I can't look at people's faces on Zoom. And what's interesting to me is with my boys, because I'm keeping an eye on my boys and I want to kind of give them the tools and help them understand things that I never did. Like one of them, he doesn't sometimes, you know, he's fidgety. I'm pretty sure that he's got some of the ADHD too, or at least some of the tendencies, because there is a genetic component. But and the thing is, I don't want him to force him. It's called masking. I don't want him to pretend to be something other than he is just to fit in, because that sucks. However, also, if he is going to live in the world and maybe keep a job and be successful in college, you know, it is easier to hear people and focus on a conversation if you're looking at them. And so I dance it back and forth across that line with him between encouraging him to, hey, if we're going to have a conversation, and if you're worried about tuning out and you don't want to miss the instructions I've given you, look at me, you know. And so I'm wondering if I was like him before I learned that I better fucking sit still and look somebody in the face. Otherwise, I was going to catch hell for it. It could be that I just had this beaten into me, metaphorically. Nobody ever hit me as a kid.
Finish your plate of food if you want to leave the table.
Oh, yeah. I had absolutely had that. Yeah.
That's interesting. Also, something that you've just said that really resonated with me. I was going to say, what happened a couple of years ago that made all of our mental health a bit shit? And then I realized we had a global pandemic. But I will say, and this is actually going back to that quote that you said earlier from Gaiman, I want you to have all the experience without the consequences of actually living through it. I, even 5 years ago, was so much mentally stronger than I am today. I wonder if there is a graph where the older you get, the more experience that you have, the more interactions that you are delivered, the more you find what your destiny or your norm is, and those things that just become bullets that shoot at you has a direct impact. Because I thought it would get better, but it gets worse.
I've been rolling this around in my head a lot because, you know, and again, you can argue it either way. You know, you can say, well, you know, if you want to make a muscle stronger, you work it until it hurts, right? And then you get stronger by pushing yourself beyond your limit. And that it's like, if you break a bone, it heals stronger, right? Except, well, yeah, but if you sprain your ankle's always weaker. So you like, that's all fallacious, like argument by analogy. None of those are legit. But what I think is the truth is, and I worry about this personally. I worry that because, like, honestly, I was in such a state that the pandemic was a relief to me. You know, like
it was the best excuse. Yeah.
No. I know a lot of introverts who are like, thank Christ, I don't have to be friends with everybody anymore.
Yeah.
But what, you know, and I don't want to for a second imply that I'm diminishing anyone's shitty COVID experience, but all of these people who are like, oh, I'm isolated, I stay at home, I don't see my friends. And on a good day, my thought was, ah, fuck bunnies, man, I've been there. That was me 8 years ago. That sucks, going through that first year of not having any friends. That's rough. That's a rough adjustment. But man, that was great back only dealing with it for a year. I'm a decade in. You know, like and when I'm not my best self, you know, oh my God, what movie is that from? I think it was Jack Nicholson just freaking out at the camera. It's like, you don't know what pain is. You like, how dare you people? Like, oh no, I had to stay at home for a couple of months. It's like, I haven't had a friend for a decade live locally, you know? You know, and so, but again, it doesn't matter that what they're going through is different or lower on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or just a different flavor. Just because like I broke my leg doesn't mean that your paper cut doesn't fucking really hurt.
Yeah.
You know? And so but here's my belief. I believe that if you go through a thing, you can learn so long as it is not so extreme that you're irreparably damaged, and that you are given the assistance and the materials and the support to heal and recover.
You are talking about this as if there is an end, as if it stops, as if there is something that when it will be done. That's not it. For me, it is a new adjustment. So my whole thing is a really interesting analogy. We will get back to the book, but this is good for me right now. I loved that you were saying, and Kyle in the comments said something really great, which is the whole, where did it go? What doesn't kill you leaves a scar for life.
Yeah, what is it? It's, you know, that which doesn't kill you hurts so much forever.
Like permanently leaves a scar. And because it's like this whole trope of you went through it and now you're stronger than ever. It's like, no, I went through it and now I'm literally wearing the baggage of that emotional and physical cost of it. You were comparing between sort of like breaking a bone and spraining an ankle. And what I think is really interesting with that is that the thing that I've been dealing with, and I've been very open and honest about this. I've told people, members of my audience and community about this. Being a woman online with an 80% male audience is like getting up every day and spraining my ankle. But that's the thing. So, but it's always just a sprain. No one thing is ever bad enough. And I call it death by 1,000 paper cuts. Because every little one is this inconvenient, irritating little nick. But when you have that constantly, consistently at a mass, you kind of look down and you're like, I'm bleeding out. Like there's no part of me that hasn't been paper cut about this. And I think that that's the thing. It's like, would I rather go through one thing knowing that I can get to the other side of it? Because this paper cut experience is my new normal. And I don't see an end. I just see ways that I can step back.
I might, if you'd forgive me, I might suggest that what you're describing is just sort of writ large, the average experience of a woman living in the world.
In today's world. Oh, no, but it's just a different flavor, isn't it?
Flavor.
It was just, it was burn at the stake.
Or say a black person.
Yes, exactly.
Or and here's the thing. It's and to compare those two things, of course you can't. Comparison is always flawed, but
it is interesting to understand what thing that you didn't do, aka existing, the thing that you are, warrants a negative experience for it.
Well, and the other thing that
you're a basic need,
Well, the other thing that you're describing is when I started looking into it, because I never considered it for myself. And then somebody's like, oh, you're describing complex post-traumatic stress. And I looked it up, and I'll save you the trouble.
Yep.
there's post-traumatic stress disorder. And if you know what I knew back then, you'd know that, oh, that's what people get when they go to war and they get blowed up, and it's scary. And then they come back and they're not right, and they need to get right. And then I looked up complex post-traumatic stress, and that's like, well, that's what happens if somebody's in, say, like a long-term kidnapping or a long-term abusive relationship or this. And then when I was researching, like, again, just fucking around, Googling on the internet, and what it said is, this isn't in the DSM-IV. It's not really an acknowledged condition, but most people do. And here's the thing. Every therapist, psychologist, anybody with half a fucking brain and who has read 8 words in a row and who gives a shit about mental health knows that trauma absolutely goes beyond a bomb went off trauma. That's real trauma. However, talking to therapists over these last several years, hunting for a therapist and then finding a therapist and having that therapist say, you need more help than I can give you. You need to go find somebody who does bigger trauma than I do, even though I found them because they did complex post-traumatic stress. Everyone knows that so much of what is really screws people up is trauma. And everyone who deals in this, they're like, it's so easy to help somebody whose trauma is related to a car wreck or a bomb, because it's one thing, and you can focus on this one thing. It's like,
there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Were you kidnapped? Oh my God, that's the worst. That was the worst 12 hours of your life. Let's work on that. But how do you, like, and I'm just using this one because it's mine to talk about. Because this might have happened live on a stream that I was doing for World Builders, talking to somebody who specialized in like mental health, somebody with a PhD and who's trauma focused. And I'm like, oh, I heard about this thing for people with ADHD called rejection sensitivity. And they're like, oh, yeah, that's just trauma. And I'm like, what do you mean? And they're like, well, your whole life, you're smart and you're capable, but everyone who loves you and takes care of you also looks at you and says, God, what's wrong with you? Why don't you just do your fucking homework? Why don't you just do this? Why don't you you have to do it. Do it. What's wrong with you? And they do it 20 times a day, your whole life, ever since you can understand words. And it's not like they're hitting you with a belt or burning you with cigarettes, but it's the people you love and who support and nurture and care for you, also constantly tiny saying, what's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? Like water dripping on a rock. And I think, and again, I was fine through the majority of my life. And then certain stressors impacted me to the point where I busted along my fault line.
Yeah.
And so it's like, oh boy, I guess I can't look at a person now.
Yeah.
This is weird. What's wrong? It's effectively trying to fix complex post-traumatic stress, this death by 1,000 cuts, these microaggressions, to use another term that a lot of people have probably heard. It's sort of like, it sucks to get shot, but it's way easier to address that injury than it's like, oh, so you ate a lead paint chip every day for the last 30 years. Cool, how the hell do you go about fixing that? It's in your bones.
Yeah.
There's no part of you that doesn't have some lead wrecking it. And I will say this, I can only imagine what it's like to be an attractive woman trying to be online or just walking down the street. But I have had an inkling of it because since I got famous, I realized that if I'm somewhere sitting at a table, reading a book, eating a sandwich, a fan of mine can feel like they are owed my time, and they'll come up and they say, and maybe it's they want to say, hi, I saw you, cool. And a lot of times it is fine, except for the times when it isn't, or I'm having a rough day, or I'm tired, or I'm with my kids. And then I say, hey, no, I'm sorry. And then they get angry. And of course, here's the difference between the situations, right? I look like this. No, I'm not smaller than half the population statistically. I am not, like, people like me don't get killed and tied up and kidnapped and beaten or assaulted by their fan base because I'm a beardy, broad Germanic dude. My thing sucks, but I don't even have a fucking yardstick to try to comprehend what it's like to be a woman who, ever since she's 13, has had dudes fucking shout at her from a car.
I will say there is something about, like, I have this thing where it's like, I don't know why anyone would want to be famous. And 20, 30 years ago, I mean, I was asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be an astronaut. I want to be a police officer. I want to be something that does good for the people. And like, I'm conditioned to think that a job and a responsibility that helps other people is the most important thing that you can be. You ask anyone now, what do you want to be? The majority will say, I want to be famous.
Just want to be famous. You know
for what? It doesn't matter. And we don't even have 15 minutes of fame anymore. The fact that anyone has a phone and can create content and blow up, we have 15 seconds of fame that everyone is fighting for. There was a comic, I don't know if it's still running. It was called Cat and Girl, and it had one of my favorite comics of all time. And somebody said, where's my 15 minutes? And he's like, what do you mean? It's like, Andy Warhol said, in the future, everyone will be famous for 15 minutes. And the other person says, oh no, that's the way it used to work. Nowadays, everybody's famous for 1,500 people. Oh. And I read that and I went, motherfucker, this is the truest thing ever said. And it's true. And here's the thing, you know, my boys, anything that has happened to me, any grooves that are dug in me that can never be fixed, it's worth it because of my boys. And I'm hoping to just sort of help them stay the way they are until they can save themselves. But my boys, like, and part of it is that I don't talk to them about the parts of my life that are bad like that, because they don't need to be worried about me like that. But they also, I'm honest with them about consent and respect and thinking about, and because they are, God bless them, like, unfortunately empathetic, because that's like a double-edged sword. It's going to hurt you every day. But I remember, like, my littler at this, so many kids are like, they watch YouTube and they're like, oh, I want to be you. My littler said, boy, I never want to be famous, in the same way that I might have said, man, I never want to be a engineer.
I wanted to be an engineer.
Of course you did.
I was gonna say garbage man. I'm like, actually, garbage man.
They were worshipped when you were 6.
I mean, you get to ride on the back of that. You get to hang out of that truck. That's fucking cool. Accountant. Yeah, I would have been like, oh, I just have to sit. I sit and that would have baffled me. Yeah.
Yeah.
But and the thing is, the culture is going to shift, because in the same way that now kind of everyone knows if you win the lottery, it's going to fuck your life.
Yes. Don't tell anyone. Mm-hmm.
Everyone kind of acknowledge, even though the story is evergreen and you keep seeing it again, you see it in these mainstream outlets. Like, they do a piece in Wired and they talk to a streamer who's making like $20 million a year. But they do this in depth. This person rides along in their life for 2 weeks. And what you see is that this person is miserable.
Yeah.
You know? And now there are people who ride it, and there's people who ameliorate it, and there's people who dodge it, or maybe there's people who are like, want to hear a confession? I've never said this. I don't think out loud. All right, get ready to clip it.
Are you wanting to say it? Yep.
Yeah.
This is live.
I mean,
okay.
I'm always cards on the table. Okay. when I remember, I think I was 10, and I can remember because it was after the birthday. I had just gotten a bullwhip because my parents were really cool. I was outside and I was using the bullwhip, and I remember I can place it in time because I can sense memory to it. But also I remember I was using the bullwhip and I was seeing if I could whip the leaves off a tree. But also I felt bad for the tree. And that's why I can place this in time. And then I thought, I just want to use my fucking bullwhip. And why do I have to feel bad for this tree? Even though I know physiologically, this tree does not have pain receptors the same way. It does not have a brain. It does if souls exist, it might not have a soul, might have and I'm at 10. This is me at 10, right? And I remember thinking, it would be so cool if there was a surgery they could do where they could take out the caring how other people feel. My life would be so good if I could take that out of me. I could just have fun all the time. And I remember thinking of it and imagining it like a Ray Bradbury story.
Yeah.
Because that was some of the best whatever I'd read back then. Like a person whose empathy has been, I didn't know the word for it, but it was empathy.
Yeah.
It was feeling for things, feeling as if you are a thing, you know? And I remember thinking that, but then I immediately, and I'm like, yeah, this isn't even a practical daydream, because anyone with this thing, the problem with you is that you would never choose to take it out because you know it would make you a monster like everyone else is, because nobody else gives a shit about the world the way you do. And you know, because they're not careful of you the way that you're careful of every goddamn person.
But you're feeling the weight of that.
And so like that's where I started at 10. It didn't get better from there, I'll tell you that for free. So man, it's rough. It's rough. Too much empathy. There should be a drug for it. And actually there is. It's probably called alcohol or any other, you know,
but isn't it so crucial? Like empathy is the cure for sociopathy, which is kind of
it's the defining human characteristic. If you don't have empathy, you're not a human, period.
Yeah.
And I'll fight to the death on that hill. So man, I am so sorry.
No, this was good for me. But it actually all pertains to the book when you really think about it.
All really, I mean, it's
all relevant.
Really about Murderbot, yeah.
Because we got on this tangent because Murderbot had consequence of trauma. Had survival techniques and mechanisms in place where when it got overwhelmed, and then Art was more trauma free and have a different coping mechanism. That's where this all was from.
Yeah, and also like Murderbot says at one point, you know, I hate feeling feelings for actual humans. I want to feel feelings about the humans on media. And, you know, which again, you know, Murderbot thinks that because,
but then that becomes parasocial.
Oh, well, yeah. But the truth is the reason Murderbot wants that is you can feel whatever you want for just a person in a show, and it's safe.
Yes, I get it.
Because you don't have to worry about the other person. What Murderbot is effectively saying is, I can feel a feeling about these people because I don't have to be responsible for them. Whereas these people,
it's escape, yeah.
These people, if I care about them, I can be hurt and betrayed. Which again, somebody said in the chat, and it was echoed by you. It was about Murderbot's reaction sort of being a defense mechanism or something. It's like, no, I would argue that it's nothing so small as that. It's that Murderbot just has no other frame of reference.
Has
They're
learned to
writ so
live,
large.
has learned to live in a worst case scenario because it
Yeah.
experiences worst case scenario.
Yeah. Actually, I'm super curious for the people that have read it. I think I even did this in my chat, and we've kind of swayed the data here by talking about it already. Can you do a poll and say, when I think about Murderbot, Murderbot's a he, Murderbot's a she, Murderbot's an it? Because I'm just curious because, and boy, then I immediately start jumping into other stuff. And I'm like, actually, what I want to know is, what do you think Murderbot was? Also, what is your self-identified gender? Because I want to say that guys, I want to say guys are more likely to think Murderbot's a guy. But the fact that my friend said that they thought of Murderbot as a female, because I think you could also like protect, defend, you got guns, whatever. Murderbot is described as very tall. But also think of it this way. Women, stereotypically speaking, broad brush, are caring. They are nurturing. They are protecting. So again, it's sort of like potato, potato. You could.
And it is a default function for us.
Default function, right? And also I'm supposed to be a Viking, right? Default function.
Yeah, there's different types of protect, isn't there? There's different masculine protection and a feminine protection.
And no offense, you get the good one because all that guys are better at is like
dying
violence.
for it. Yeah.
Aggression and violence and violent aggression.
And we have empathy.
Yeah, or at least nurturance. Nurturance is sort of tangible empathy, in my opinion. Whereas wanting to beat people up is arguably, I don't know if it's the opposite of that, but it certainly works best in absence of that.
I did see way earlier when we brought it up, someone's default was she. Mine was swayed to he because there was a male narrator. I actually, confession, was 3/4 of the way through the first book before I really had to check my visual brain and went, what am I seeing Murderbot as? And I realized, because I will draw from media subconsciously to depict what I've heard. Yes, I sometimes it's from this one video game that I've loved and it's just like a very 2D image of a character. Other times I will really flesh it out. And I'd noticed that 3/4 of the way through, I was stumped because some of the dialogue and the words weren't matching what my brain had put together. And because of this cover, I had depicted Murderbot definitely as a masculine male, but it was one part Frankenstein's monster.
Wow.
And one part Bane from the Schumacher Batman movies, when Bane and Uma Thurman's Poison Ivy, you know, that she'd punch the thing.
Yeah.
That's how I pictured Murderbot, but with a Darth Vader-esque shaped helmet on. Why?
I mean, fair.
Because all of these have, and this is where it came together in my subconscious brain, organic human material.
Oh, yeah.
So when organic, sort of like the human parts were harvested, my brain went blip, and it was this beast form of all of those combined. So I took the liberty, and I actually, like the internet's help, I Googled fan art, and it's almost 100% of the depictions of Murderbot is a black man or an Asian man.
Wow.
Yeah. So here I am with this barely human monster-esque Bane, Frankenstein's monster, decrepit concoction of human parts. It wasn't really like that. It was like still a human, but it was like it's like veiny and ugh. But then when you look online, this art is beautiful.
And there's a ton of cultural unpack there, because and this is, boy, what are the biggest, broadest brushstrokes of cultural perception, and it's like, well, Asian is viewed as deft physical confrontation, right? And because again, if we're saying man violent, women nurturing, like we're dealing with not the reality, but cultural perception stereotypes. Whereas Black is violent, Asian is, violent but trained for it,
Smart.
which is more like what Murderbot is. Or you could argue the technical or like good with coding, that would be an Asian thing. That's wild. I never thought of either of that. I wonder if there's a skin pigmentation mentioned.
I went back and listened to it again for that exact
themselves.
reason. Because what I actually thought about that, which is what I'm noticing more and more with modern storytelling, is not painting the entire picture, but using sort of like nudging towards what it could be. Because a lot of the time, a character's most important points are its characteristics. Are they boisterous? Are they shy? Are they confident? And I'm noticing when we go back to the first book, what we learn about the crew, so much is said in the name, just the name. And that's what I think is so clever. Dr. Mensah. Mensah has like a European type feel to it. I pictured her, I've read Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, and again, I listened to the book, and there was a very strong European female character who was quite stern, and I just immediately associated those two characters. You had Dr. Bharajwa.
Dr. Bharawaj, yeah.
Bharawaj, my bad. Valescu, Gurathan, Pinley, Rati, Arada. So essentially, these are not your quintessential white name. There is not Smith or a Jones.
This is a culturally diverse, far-flung future. And some of the other people are described as having more of it's like, and what I liked is at one point he said, it said, this person is sort of like, their darkish brownish skin is kind of lighter than everyone else's. So like by implication, it's like, yeah, kind of everybody is dusky. This person's a little less dusky. This person has kinky hair, but it does feel like a not corporate white future.
Yes, my bad. Dr. Mensah, Nick Swing says, is actually described as having dark brown skin. And Miss Necromancer said, I saw Mensah as Hebrew. And then Nick Swing says Martha Wells said her ideal casting would be Viola Davis. So
oh shit, cool.
I did not get that. I immediately attached it to who was the most powerful, smart woman I
can think of. Yep.
And it was this Dr. Strat from Project Hail Mary who basically had autonomous power of the entire human race and had to deliver the greater good scenarios. So it's so interesting how your brain will kind of attach to different things. But I really did love that. I love that there was minimal description, but enough was said with when you've got, Pinley. You're like, I get it.
Yep.
Loud and clear.
It's so economical in its writing. It's so easy and catchy, and it does the thing that I think my favorite sort of writing always does, which it says more than it says.
Yes.
There's a lot of stuff, and I can be guilty of it when I write if I'm not doing my best or if I'm not given enough time to edit things out. Sometimes you say you talk this much, but you've said this much. You can write also, and you can say this much, but you can convey this much. That's what I always strive for. And some of the naming is there. Although I will say, I'm so glad that I listened to it before I tried to read it to my boys, because as somebody with some dyslexia, like there's no way I could have guessed what these names were. Like,
thank you. I had to read it just then, and I was like, I've only heard this, and you said it. I'm like, that's how it was spoken to me. But I read it, I'm like,
Yep.
Yeah, I'm the same. Consonants will jumble.
Bast Insider here says aphantasia makes these interactions.
Aphantasia.
Is that the inability? Thank you. Is that the inability to picture things visually in your head?
Yes. So there's a really, really good study on aphantasia. Rachel Hine, who is my co-host on Nerdist Book Club, has aphantasia. And it was so interesting to learn because my brain I can detail things to the nth degree. And it was interesting seeing how, again, we read the same words, but our brains would build very different pictures. Hers was black, empty, and mine was like detailed. And then Hector Navarro, who I also did the show with, would see things as if he was the director. And so he was seeing it from a third person point of view, building out the scene. And I think all of them are fascinating.
Of all the people in Murderbot, I picture Murderbot least because I'm riding around behind Murderbot's eyes. I'm not seeing Murderbot. I am seeing out from Murderbot. And it's the same, this is a weird comparison, but as a writer, I can see all of the characters in my book. I see Quoth least. Because it's all first person.
Not me.
I mean, everybody else
gets to
imagine.
I see him in my dreams.
No. But also I have some face blindness, so I'm a weird
So how do you picture things? So the aphantasia or aphantasia study is there are 4 diagrams and it says picture an apple. And there's 4 different apples ahead. One is just, it's a blank page. There is absolutely, you just cannot picture this apple. The second one, it is a white outline of a very simple apple.
It's a shape, okay. The realm of icon.
The next one is kind of like the Apple logo. So you can understand that it's a red apple, but it's still somewhat 2-dimensional. It might have a bit of shade behind it. And then the last apple is this 3-dimensional, very realistic looking apple. And when we did this test, I was like, I can fucking smell this apple. I can tell you the crunch that it makes when I pierce my teeth through that skin. Like this is how I can go. And then Rachel's just like, there's nothing.
Well, hold on, because I don't know this. Do people with aphantasia, do they not have sense memory of taste or smell?
I don't know.
I always thought it was only visual. Because like when I am writing, what would frequently happen when I would go to the mountain and I'd be doing it, and then a lot of times eventually I get up and I go into the kitchen and I'm like, oh, it's not raining. Oh. You know, or I'd be like, oh, it's daytime. Mm-hmm. Oh, it's not winter.
So you're placing it.
I was somewhere else. It was all of that. Mm-hmm. Now, my face blindness, I think, is a different thing in the brain that makes it hard to recognize. By the way, if anyone is looking, if you dig weird brain stories, The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat is amazing. And it's named after the case study of the person who, like, his wife brought him in and she's like, my husband has, and he's like in his late 60s. He's a professor of music, a prestigious, like world-renowned, respected professor at the university, and brings her husband in. It's like, yeah, my husband has trouble. And they do a vision test. He tests his reflex. He gives them once over. It's like, well, I'm not seeing a lot here, but if you're saying there's problems, maybe if I come and see him at home. Mm. And then what happens is it's like, okay, cool. And what happened is the man stands up and he goes, and then he looks at his wife and he puts his hands around the top of his wife's head. And he goes like this, and then he's like, and he's confused, and he goes like this, and then he's like, and then his wife hands him his hat, and he's like, right, and that's the story. Is The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat, And then he goes and observes this person in his home because there's obviously perceptual things going on, but he can see fine.
Huh.
It's just that he was like, and it's absolute. Everyone who cares enough to sit all the way through our weird, eclectic discussion of humanity and perception and mental everything, you gotta check this book out. It's so amazing. But what he was doing is he looked at her and he's like, I'm looking for my hat. And that's what a hat is to do with this. This is a head. Hat is. And so he's like, here, it goes on. No, where is it's on his here? And so what happened, just one more piece of this story. He's connecting concepts, but he can't remember the name of it verbally. And he can't, so he goes over to his house and the doctor gave him things and said, what's this? And so he looked, he goes, oh, and he says, this is a piece of fabric enfolded upon itself, stitched together with several differently shaped, irregular pockets. And he goes, do you have any idea what it could be for? And he goes, it could be a purse, and each of these pockets is for a different type of coin. And he goes, oh, that's it. It's like, anything else you think? He goes, well, and he kind of talks about it. And then eventually, like, the conversation moves on. And then he goes, oh, it's a glove. But he could not visually identify it. That's it, right? You got to read this, Maude. It'll knock you over. It'll knock you over. And what I love most is that at the end of telling this story, this person who is a world-renowned neurobiologist, that's all of the weirdest shit gets filtered to him because he's at the top. At the end of it, he talked to the man's wife and he goes, you know what? He goes, I think that, and observed him in his whatever. His students would come up to him. He wouldn't recognize them at all because he had no facial but as soon as they spoke, because he taught voice, as soon as they spoke, he's like, I know your name, I know everything about you. But the face was nothing. It was invisible. It was less than invisible. And so at the end of it, what he said was, he's like, this guy, he can't do some of what we do. That's no big deal at all. He gets through his life. He does what he loves. He's good at his job. He is happy. There's nothing wrong with this man. And I'm like, damn, like, he's playing a different game. He got different wires, but like, what a beautiful way. What a beautiful way. And like, there's several of these studies, and maybe it's a little fluffy for people who are like into hardcore neurophysiology. But I love the fact that he met a person who could not form new memories for the last 30 years. And at the end, when he's sort of discussing what he thinks, he talks about the nature of the soul. And I'm like, come at me. Like, don't it's not all acetylcholine. Talk to me about a soul, dude. Yeah. Like, let's have a big conversation.
Mm-hmm. A face is a part of a soul. It's not everything. Yeah. I hear you. Yeah, that's gorge. It's so interesting to hear and see how people see differently. Back to the aphantasia study, what really fucked me up was that I use sort of my inner mind to draw, and my subconscious will literally pull from images that I have seen or witnessed or been a part of for over decades. And it's usually video games or books or movies. When I did that same Apple test and my eyes were shut, and I had to physically see it behind my eyes using the back of my eyelids as a canvas, out of the 4 examples, I was number 2.
Right.
It was just a white outline.
When you were describing it, I'm like, hold on, that's not visual. What you just said, and I think maybe that's it for me, because I'm imagining experiential things. But again, when people are like, what's up with Denna? And I'm like, well,
she's a brunette. She's a brunette.
Yep.
She's a brunette. But let me
And
tell you
that's
5 things about her
yeah,
personality like that, though, you know?
yeah. I mean, I get the characters, but I think also that keeps me from it, in the same way that if you, how about this? Sorry, I'm going to start 8 different sentences and not finish any. When I got to chat with Mary Robinette Kowal about costuming ages ago as a World Builders thing. And she's like, okay, we unlocked the stretch goal. Here we go. We're going to talk about clothes in Tamarant. And I'm like, okay. And we sat down and I go, so how bad did I fuck up? And she goes, I went through things really closely. She goes, there's nothing in here that's wrong, mostly because you don't include specific detail to be wrong with. You say pocket, but you don't describe the pocket in a way that would be inappropriate given the fashion or technology of your world.
The fabric looked expensive or well worn. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
Ambrose wore black.
And then I'm like, tell me about pockets. And then she talks about pockets, told me about buttons. And I'm like, tell me more about buttons, which I didn't know, but now I do. Now that's in the world.
But wasn't that safe for you to not dance a dance that you didn't know the moves to, you know?
Well, and for me, because I didn't know about it, because I don't think about it, I'm not going to put it in. And so I think the same is true with the way I describe characters. If you see my characters, there's a color of hair, there's a color of eyes, and then they typically have
demeanor,
a gesture or something, and I hold it to 3 details to keep it simple, because if I give people 3 things, everyone has a commonality of experience because anyone can remember 3 things. If I give people 15 details, everybody picks a different 3, and then everybody gets to know a different Simon.
Yeah.
But what everybody knows about Simon is he has sandy hair.
And he's got sweet, kind eyes.
He is a sweet boy, and he has those sweet eyes. But also, the only reason you know about his hair is because it's always in his eyes. He's brushing it out of his eyes.
So we can see the pretty eyes again.
So you see his pretty eyes. Also, what you don't realize, I mean, until book 3, but he's taller than you think. It's just that he doesn't carry himself.
Don't make me fall in love with a fictional character, Pat.
He's taller than Kvothe. You want to know what his real name is?
Sim.
No, that's his nickname. That's just what everyone calls him.
What's his first name?
Well, it's a part of his first name.
Cimmerillion. No, what is it?
Oh, you got it. Sim is the cinnamon roll.
Persimmon, says Manda. Persimmon. Per the last Simon.
Percy. But again, like same thing with Ari, same thing with once I did a lot of it deliberately because I wanted to keep my description economical, which is really important if you're introducing like 4 characters in a scene.
But you also wrote the dialogue that had mannerisms and characteristics within it. So I could hear Ambrose talk.
That's how you sneak it in, is a little bit interstitial in the dialogue, but also realistically, and I'm pretty sure this is as proven as a thing can be if it's in one of the soft sciences, people form their impressions of characters and what they look like mostly through their dialogue and how they speak, not what they say. Yeah. What they say and what they do. Because, and again, my example is always, I read the Chronicles of Amber at least 3 or 4 times, and I always thought of Benedict as a stocky, broad-shouldered, shorter guy, even though he is literally somebody jokingly refers to him as the scarecrow of doom. Benedict is tall. He's tall and lean and long arms and legs, like somebody would need to be a menace with all weapons.
But you piece together something very different.
Oh, no, it doesn't matter what you write. And it doesn't matter what they wrote. I'm going to picture him how I picture him. And the author has to be very careful if you want to nudge everyone in the same direction. And that's why I'm very economical with my character descriptor details. Also, especially with the first person like Murderbot,
good segue.
They're an everyman, every bot. which makes them easier for us to be from in the first person. If it's like, you know, their hair isn't described, you know, the things that are described are things that are equally alien to everyone, which gives all of us a commonality of experience with Murderbot. Mm-hmm. You know, but they don't, oh my God, imagine the stereotypical shitty character intro where Murderbot looks in the mirror at its breasts, you know, which is, you know, that's always the joke. Everybody is the bad way to do, like, to make sure your reader knows you're reading a book with a female main character.
I just joked about this today. I said I grew up on a lot of fantasy, and it took me a long time to realize that I was exclusively reading books from a very male gaze. And I was like, you know, it was great to start this book club where we read a plethora of different authors with different ethnicities, because I actually know what women's eye colors are now, instead of how boobily their boobs boobed when they boobed down the stairs. So that was nice.
Totally. Oh man. I mean, to be fair, here's the thing, and this is a story I haven't told for years, but when I did more conventions, more panels, there is the joke, because this used to be the stereotype if you have a first person female, because if I'm Philip Marlowe, the smoky saxophone comes on and the bombshell walks through the door of my office, and I look at her and the reader gets, but hold on, if I'm the bombshell, how does the reader get to look at all the boobaliness? Obviously, you look in the mirror like all you women do at the beginning of every day. You examine your own body in excruciating detail, and you really admire your own boobs.
Every day.
And so, and the thing is, we would talk about this on panels because it is ridiculous. And then I would have to say, I had a friend, and I once watched her, you know, this person I lived with, and I watched and did care about their appearance and dressed nicely, and, you know, had a healthy amount of vanity, which is something it's baffling to me I don't have. Like just any giving a shit.
Your beard has cleavage right now.
I'm spathic as all get out. But the people who say, like, how do you get your beard to do that, really don't understand what's going on here. This is what happens when you don't do anything for 3 years. This is what a Germanic man looks like in the wild. But I watched her actually look at herself in the mirror and then absolutely check out her own butt. But, and this is the best part, then, like, while looking at herself, jumped into the air, spun all the way around, and landed still looking at her butt so she could see what it looked like from the other side, jumping in the air. And I'm like, this is something that if I wrote this scene into a book, I would seem like this, everyone would call me out for what a ridiculous thing. But the truth is, we are all ridiculous humans, and we do stupid shit all the time, and we're vain, and sometimes we do look at our own butts in the mirror. Of course we do, except it's still not great to do that. So,
because I always saw it as, you know, that this is the male gaze. What would I do if I were a woman? Oh, I would want to know if these gestures made the pressure on my buttons, you know, like it's that kind of thing where it's like, you know, that's not what we're focusing on.
Here's the thing for Murderbot, right? Murderbot isn't at all curious about, like, and I think this more than anything firmly establishes Murderbot as the most comfortable in their gender identity of anyone.
Name me one default, in my mind, man who is okay with losing 2 inches of their height to fit in.
Yeah.
Name me one other person ever, or bot ever.
And that was interesting to me. It's like you could be taller or shorter, and Murderbot's like, yeah, cut a couple of inches of bone out of my leg so I'm shorter and I don't match factory specs anymore. That, in my opinion, was the best indicator of like perceiving as female. Except the other thing is Murderbot. Like I will say, if I were suddenly in a woman body, there I would certainly be really curious about a lot of stuff, and I'd check it out like all over the place. And if you got a chance to test drive a dude body, would you be like looking at all the stuff and
I might lift
around?
things and be like, how with this extra muscle would it be to kind of lift heavier things?
That's interesting.
Yeah, but I would want to know if I had nice shoulders.
How about the gear though, like the biz? Would you be like,
Third.
would you be curious about that?
Third down the line. Yeah, it'd be shoulders, legs, then my junk.
Wow. See,
yeah, or maybe jawline before that as well. I'd want to know how masculine my face comes across.
Huh. Oh, I'm thinking just like straight up you're in a different body. Not like me, but
shoulders,
a different gender.
legs, jaw, junk.
Yeah. See, for me, it'd be like there's a lot of like the functional differences in the two machines. But Murderbot isn't ever Murderbot
doesn't like, even want to helicopter.
How dare you? How dare you even like you're the grossest thing ever for suggesting I have any sort of generative organs.
Isn't that so funny that that's the line? And that
like,
absolutely crossed the line. So I wouldn't mind talking about that because we had amazing feedback from the community. A reader who is asexual said that a trope in AI or robotic science fiction is to make a robot asexual.
Yeah.
And not a human asexual, but it's always a robotic trope. So it's easier to make the robot have spectrum-like brain thought or brain patterns, because a lot of people on the spectrum kind of went, yeah, I really struggle to understand these sorts of human connections or emotions, or being neurodivergent, I can get overwhelmed with A, B, and C that I'm discovering with this robot. But sexuality with this robot is really interesting.
Yeah.
Because it's not just an asexuality of I don't associate or feel sexuality or sexual tendencies, but it's an adverse reaction to sexual nature.
Yeah. Yeah, it is pointedly adverse. And I wonder if, and this might go back to Heinlein, which is like there's the turning point for Michael when he realizes like what's the defining human characteristic. He's like, I was at the zoo and I saw there was this monkey and he got beat up by this other monkey. And I felt really bad for that monkey. And then that monkey eventually got up and dusted itself off. And then it found a littler monkey and it kicked the shit out of that little monkey. And this, for the character, what happened is they laughed hysterically and then effectively went into a coma for a couple of weeks to re-examine everything they knew about human nature in this context, where it's like you're always like, we get hit by a bigger monkey and we hit a little, and it's built into our code.
You described my what do you call primary school?
You're right.
I wonder elementary school.
I wonder if it's just important for Murderbot to have something to look down on. And it's like, well, I might be a Murderbot, but at least I'm not a sex bot. Maybe it has nothing to do with them, but it's like, can I not be the worst?
Yes.
Is this the one thing I can have?
Yes.
I don't know if
my disdain against them still makes me feel better.
It's
because I'm not at the bottom of a whatever. It's not a food chain because he doesn't eat it. Ugh.
Right.
Yeah,
it's
that's
so
interesting.
Hard.
That's interesting.
So hard.
But there is something about this where it's like when they're watching the serials and there's moments of intimacy. True Scorn says sex is intimacy and it just doesn't like intimacy. And there's a great moment at the end of The Artificial Condition. We're so appreciative of you and what you've done for us. You've over-delivered for us. Can we hug you?
It's like, can I hug? Can I? It's like, oh, absolutely not. Mm-mm. I also love that it thinks if you're going to protect humans, they might as well be small, soft humans that smell nice. And I'm like, fuck, Murderbot, I get you. Like, So
It always could be worse. Yeah.
yeah. So I hate to talk about this and run, but speaking of small humans that are soft and smell nice, I have my own little humans who love Murderbot that I should put some food in. I hate to kind of jump here,
No,
given that we
we are
gave
at time.
a late start, but I got my own little humans to take care of.
No, totally get it. I'm going to keep probably having a little bit of a chat about some of the things we've missed because we had a long list to go through with these two books. But Patrick, thank you so much for giving me your evening to talk about Murderbot. Thank you for getting us onto the series to begin with.
I love the series. I'll happily come back and talk about more in the future if you want. Sorry to everything I talk about lately seems to stray strongly into mental health. So sorry for that long cul-de-sac tangent, although I enjoyed it very much.
I needed it. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That's nice. That makes me feel better.
Yeah.
But yeah, take care of yourselves, everybody. Be well. And
before you scoot though, I do this every time. Where can people find you online? What are you working on? Let's talk about your charity.
I mean, I'm Pat Rothfuss pretty much everywhere. I haven't been doing a lot. I kind of
Cows and cuts.
Actually, I had to go stare at a wall for the last couple of months, and I pulled in my borders, and I've been taking care of my boys and trying to get a little healthier. I will be posting on my blog soon. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Twitch. You can, yeah. But if you want me, you can find me. You know how Google works. You're on the internet. Oh, and here you said that it's on the way.
Yes, let's talk about this. This is huge.
I realized I had a copy on my desk after I mentioned it pre-show, but there we go. Introduction by Pat Rothfuss. It's the new version. I wrote an intro. If as if I didn't feel like enough of a poser, who the fuck am I to be writing an intro for The Last Unicorn? But anyway, there you go. I'll happily come and chat about that a little bit too, or maybe just do a soundbite for you. You don't need me to talk about all these books.
I love our conversations. It's literally the basis of our friendship when we get to chat about books like this. So I will take anything that I can get every single time. Thank you so much for giving me your evening again. Thank you for introducing me to this book series as well. Have an amazing night. Feel free to dip out, but I'm glad that you stopped by, and thank you for the chats as always.
Thanks for having me. I'll see you later, everybody.
Bye.
Oh, and so I don't screw up your stream. Should I just leave?
You know what? I'm gonna need 30 seconds, and I'm gonna chuck a be back sign up so we can just fucks with whatever's okay.
Okay. Cool. So I will turn off my camera. Bye, everybody. Bye. Have a good time.